US federal court has blocked President Trump's sweeping tariffs on imports. A three-judge panel on the Court of International Trade said Trump exceeded his authority by invoking an emergency law to impose those levies. The White House said it's appealing. It's unclear if and when the tariffs would be halted. After weeks of market turmoil, stocks in Asia have jumped. Mike Hanna's following developments from Washington, D.C.
This was an eagerly waited decision. This particular case was brought by a group of small businesses who argued that President Trump did not have the power to impose these tariffs without the permission or the consent of Congress. President Trump introduced these tariffs on an emergency basis in terms of a 1977 law. Now, the court has held that President Trump acted outside his powers in terms of doing this without consulting or getting the permission of Congress, which has the right, the constitutional right, to set or declare tariffs. There are a number of other cases of similar circumstances pending before this exact court. Now, it's very significant because many of President Trump's executive orders have been on the basis of emergency powers that he's given to himself in an attempt to circumvent Congress. This is a particularly important decision because you now have a court, a three-judge court, holding that he was acting outside his powers. And this particular court cannot be accused of being an activist one, as Trump and his followers have accused other courts that have ruled against him. One of the judges was appointed by Trump himself, another by Barack Obama, and the third by Ronald Reagan. Now, within an hour of this judgment dropping, the administration announced that it was going to appeal, and in fact did file an appeal with the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. Now, what is not clear in all of this is whether these tariffs are halted immediately or whether they remain in place while the appeal process goes through, because once the federal court rules on the case, it is very likely there will be another appeal which will go and end up in the Supreme Court. Mike Hanna, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Waiting in the wings, Robert Scott. Hopefully we can hear you now. He's a financial analyst and former director of trade and manufacturing policy research at the Economic Policy Institute. He's joining us from Maryland. Robert, I hope you can hear us at this time. What specifically has the court said Trump can and cannot do, and what laws have been broken, apparently?
Well, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act allows the president to impose sanctions essentially on rogue actors, individuals who've been sanctioned by the International Court, or countries such as Iran or North Korea that are hostile to the United States. And the presidents in the past have imposed sanctions on the movement of assets, foreign direct investment, U.S. dollar accounts, and so forth. But in this case, President Trump exceeded his authority by going after all U.S. trade because of the existence of a trade deficit, which the U.S. has had for over 50 years now, since the mid-1970s. And that's just a bridge too far in the view of the International Court.
A bridge too far. I mean, the fact the Court of International Trade has stepped in here, I mean, what does that say to you about the president?
Thank you.
What does that say to you about the president's executive powers and how far they should or should not extend?
Well, I think that this ruling is likely to be appealed to the Supreme Court. But from what I read amongst the legal experts who have viewed it, it seems quite clear that the president has overstepped his legal authority under the IEEPA, as it's known. He has other options available. He could attempt to impose sanctions. For example, as a threat to national security, he would have to go through a process and have hearings in that case. But he was able to do that in the case of steel and aluminum and autos in 2020. But I think it's important to note that most of those tariffs were imposed on China and some other steel-producing countries. But the U.S. trade position did not improve. I mean, this was the point of these tariffs. And in fact, U.S. trade deficits continue to grow. And in fact, China's exports to the world continue to grow. They just ship them to the U.S. through other countries.
Given that you say Trump is appealing, I wonder how robust the legal system is to stand up to the immense pressure, no doubt, that it will face from the Trump administration.
Well, that's one type of pressure. On the other side, we saw investors lose hundreds of billions of dollars in the stock market because of the concerns that these tariffs that the president announced on his tariff day, as he called it, threatened to boost prices in the U.S. dramatically. 10% across the board tariffs on all imports, tariffs as much as 40 to 60% on other products in other countries.
Now, stock markets have risen in Asia on Thursday morning. US stock futures also jumped after this court ruling. The US dollar also making gains against the Japanese yen and the Swiss franc, both seen as very stable currencies. What does that say to you?
I think that markets will react favorably if the court decision is upheld and these tariffs are, in fact, withdrawn. It may be, in fact, that people who've been hit with tariffs already and hundreds of millions of dollars have been collected just since the tariffs were imposed, that those tariffs may have to be rebated to the original importers who brought those goods into the country.
OK, Robert Scott, good to have you on Al Jazeera. Many thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.